Daf Nun Amud Aleph, 11 lines from the top. Continuing on the discussion, if a Kohen Gadol, the Shechta the Par, is Par and Yom Kippur, they had the Kabbalah Saddam, he died, can the replacement Kohen Gadol, can now he use that same dam, can he be mazah that dam in the Kodesh Kadoshim? How can the replacement Kohen Gadol use the dam of the first Kohen Gadol? There's Allah Lamesh Sinai that a chata shemesa ba'aleha is lamisa. There's 5 cases where a chatas has to be left to die. One of the cases is if the person designated a korban, he designated behema first korban chatas. If he died, then that animal has to be left to die. And similarly, if it was shechted and the owner died, you cannot do the hazal sadam. It's possible. Now, if the first Kohen Gadol, he shechted the par, so it's considered paroi, his par. It's his korban chatas. And if he died, then how can the replacement Kohen Gadol use that? That should be considered a case of a chatas shemesa ba'aleha. That is l'misa. It should be possible. So what is the whole case over here? What's the possibility, the practicality of this case where the dam should be possible and this replacement Kohen Gadol should not be able to use it in any event? Amrle Ravan Bar Ravad Rava. He said, Amre Talmidcha Amar Rav Amam. He said that your Talmidim said in the name of Rav Amam Chatas Tzibur V'loy Lamisa Osla. It's considered the par of the Yom Kippur, the par of the Kohen Gadol and Yom Kippurim is considered to be not a korban yachid. It's considered to be korban tzibur. This haloch l'mayshmi Sinai that the chata shemesa ba'alez l'misa osla, that's by a korban yachid, a private korban. But the chatas, the par of the Kohen Gadol Yom Kippur, is not considered to be a korban yachid, since it's a chipur ba'ado ba'ad beisai, it's a kapara for all of the kahanim. It's considered to be a korban tzibur, and a korban tzibur, there's no halacha l'mayshmi Sinai that it's l'misa osla. So therefore, you would still have the application of this case. This non we learned in a Mishnah. Amar loy Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir said the Tanakama. Tanakama said that they listed chilukim between a korban yach and a korban tzibur, and he said that one of the chilukim is that a korban tzibur is deicha Shabbos and deicha Tumah. So he asked the Tanakama, v'aloi par Yom Kippur v'chavite Kohen Gadol u'Pesach the korban yachid hi. It's a korban yachid v'deicha Shabbos v'esa Tumah. He says, how can you say that this is considered to be, that you say that a korban tzibur is deicha Shabbos and Tumah, a korban yachid is not? The par of Yom Kippurim, the par of Yom Kippur, and the chavita Kohen Gadol, and the chavitim, the mincha that the Kohen Gadol brings daily, is in the morning and in the evening, and the korban Pesach, these are private korbanos. These are korbanei yachid, and they are the korban yachid v'deicha Shabbos v'esa and they are deicha Shabbos and Tumah. So you see that it's not davke korban yachid; it governs tzibur rather. That's deicha Shabbos and Tumah. It's even a korban yachid. So lav michlal diklaman da'omer the tzibur. So therefore, you see that the Tanakama held that it's considered to be a korban tzibur, meaning the Tanakama said that the klal is a korban tzibur is deicha Shabbos and deicha Tumah. Rav Meir asked, I'm on a from the case of par Yom Kippurim chavita Kohen Gadol Pesach. He said, Rav Meir said that the korban yachid and still they're deicha Shabbos and Tumah. So you see that the klal, it's not restricted, it's not limited to a korban tzibur. I'll go upon him. What do you see over here? You see that nevertheless that the Tanakama held that it is considered to be a korban tzibur. It's considered to be a korban tzibur. So therefore, you, according to the Tanakama, you don't have the problem. That is a chata shemesa ba'aleha because it's a korban tzibur. The Taisus Shonim explains how is this considered to be a korban tzibur. Why would we say that is a korban tzibur? The par Yom Kippurim is considered korban tzibur, like we mentioned, because the kippur ba'adoi v'ad beisa. It's a kapara not only for him, but it's for him and all the kohanim. The korban Pesach could be considered to be a korban tzibur because it's babi kinufia. It's brought together, beroivam, they're brought together. as opposed to a regular korban yochid that's brought individually and separately. The chavitim, why should the chavitim be considered a korban tzibur? L'chayr, it's a kohen gadol's private mincha. They explain, the Rishonim explain, because it's connected to the Talmud. It's connected to the Talmud. It's brought between the mincha of the korban Talmud and the minchas tzonchim, so it's connected to the korban Talmud. Another raya that is considered, it could be considered to be a korban tzibur, is that even if there's no kohen gadol, the tzibur still is required to bring it. So therefore, al kaponim, we see over here that apparently there's a machlokes between Reb Meir and the Tanna Kama, and according to the Tanna Kama, the par of the Yom Kippurim, the par of the Kohen Gadol Yom Kippurim, is considered to be korban tzibur, and therefore you don't have the issue of achata shemeisa ba'aleha. According to your understanding, we see in the Brisa, Diktane, Amar Loi, Rabbi Yaakov, he asks on the Tanna Kama, V'aloi par helam dover shel tzibur, u'sirei avodas kochavim v'chagiga. The par helam dover shel tzibur, if Bezdin makes a mistake in Hayroah on a dover shel cars, and the tzibur follows that psak, they follow it, and therefore they're oiver b'shegeg. They have to bring the special par helam dover shel tzibur, the special par lechat. So that's clearly a korban tzibur. And the sir, the chatas, the goat that the tzibur has to bring, if they're oiver v'edazora, the chagiga, and the korban chagiga that Klal Yisrael they bring, people bring when they're oil regel. The Gemara on Daf Nun Aleph will ask, why is that considered a korban tzibur? They bring it individually, but al kolponim, they are korbanos tzibur. The korban tzibur, ve'ein doich lo yiseh Shabbos lo yiseh tuma. Now you're saying Tanna Kama, that a korban tzibur is doich Shabbos and tuma. That a korban tzibur, that if the tzibur is tuma, you bring it nevertheless. And it's doich Shabbos, is brought on Shabbos. Well, I'll show you these korbanos. There are clearly that korbanos tzibur, and they're not doich. Now, are you going to say the way you understand the machlokes? You're going to understand the way that it's a machlokes and the definition, how to define the korbanos, how to define the par helam and par kara shel Yom Kippurim. Is the par shel Yom Kippurim a korban yochid or korban tzibur? That's the way you understand the machlokes and the definition, how to define the par Yom Kippurim. Well, over here, can you say that? Can you say over here that there is anybody who says that it's korban yochid, the par helm dover shel tzibur? The Se'avedes Kocham, can anybody say it's a korban yochid? It's clearly not a korban yochid. It's clearly a korban tzibur, and therefore they can't be arguing in the definition of this korban of the korbanos. And similarly, they're not arguing on the definition of the par Yom Kippurim. So therefore, we have to revise our understanding of the machlokes. So that's mavur from Taisus and Amud Beis and Taisus Rishonim and other Rishonim, that therefore we are now revising our understanding of the machlokes. It's not a machlokes how to define the par Yom Kippurim or the other korbanos. It's a question is the machlokes is on the principle of the Tanna Kama. Ela Tanna Kama kamarali. Reb Meir and Rav Yaakov, they're asking and they're responding to the Tanna Kama. They heard that the Tanna Kama said that the rule is that a korban tzibur is deich Shabbos and tuma. The korban yochid ain't a deich lo yiseh Shabbos lo yiseh tuma, but not a korban yochid. And on that, they're asking on this principle, on this klal, not the definition of the korbanos. And on that, Amar loy Rabbi Meir. So Rabbi Meir says to Tanna Kama, korban yochid klalu. Is that really a klal? Is that a principle that a korban yochid is not deich Shabbos and tuma? I'll show you not that way. V'aloi par Yom Kippurim v'chavite kohen gadol Pesach, which are korbanai yochid. They're considered korbanos that are a korban yochid. The korban yochid over deicha Shabbos is a tuma. It's a korban yochid and it is deicha. So your rule is incorrect. And on the other hand, the other side of it, Rabbi Yaakov says korban tzibur klalu. Is it a klal that the korban tzibur is deicha Shabbos and tuma? I'll show you not that way. V'aloi par helm dover shel tzibur v'sirei avodas kochavim v'chagiga. In all these cases, they're considered to be korbanei tzibur. The korban tzibur hu ve'ein deicha loy esa Shabbos v'loy esa tuma, and they're not deicha. So therefore, your klal is incorrect. What is the proper klal? What is the real principle? Ella, nekait hai klal biyadav. Take this rule in your hand. What is the rule? Kol shezmanai kavua. It's not dependent whether it's a tzibur or a yochid. Kol shezmanai kavua. If it has a set time, deichas Shabbos is a tumah. Then it's deichas Shabbos and deichas a tumah. It's a korban that has to come at this specific time. Then it's deichas. If it doesn't have a set time, it's not dependent on a korban tzibur or not. It's not a question of tzibur or yochid. It's a question of zmana kavua. Therefore, we say the par of the Yom Kippurim is zmana kavua. It has to come at a specific time. Therefore, zmana kavua. It's daicha, meaning according to this understanding, it's considered to be a korban yochid, and therefore it's a korban yochid. But it's zmana kavua, notwithstanding that it's a korban kavua, it has to come at this specific time. It's daicha Shabbos and Tumah. Apar helm dover shel tzibur, notwithstanding the fact that it's a korban tzibur, but it doesn't come at a specific time. It's not daicha Shabbos and Tumah. That's the principle. But really, I'll tell you, therefore, that the par Yom Kippurim is a korban yochid, not a korban tzibur. Well, if it's a korban yochid, then the question returns that how can the replacement kohen gadol come with the dam of the original of the first kohen gadol? Should it not be considered a achata shemesu ba'ala lamisa? It should be possible. So how do you have this whole scenario? Abaya asks Kashan Rav. No. You're saying that the par of the Kohen Gadol Yom Kippur is a korban yochid. I'll ask you a question. It says par v'sor shel Yom Kippur m'shavdu. If the par and the sor of Yom Kippur got lost, v'hifresh achirim tachteh, and then they therefore designated a replacement one for these ones, and they were makraved, and then the original ones were found. Kulam yamus. They all are left to die. And similarly, the Sira Vedic Chom, that laws, they were lost and they designated other ones. Then the replacement ones they were makraved. They found the original ones. Then v'hifresh achirim tachteim, and now they were makraved them. And they found the original ones, kulam yamusu, they all are left to die. So it's a case of achatas shekipru ba'aleha, which is another one of the cases of the 5 halacha l'maish misina, that achatas shekipru ba'aleha, that the owners had a kapora with a replacement chatas. The original ones, they found the original ones, they're left to die. Kul yamusu, div Rabbi Yehuda. That's what Rabbi Yehuda says. But Rabbi Elazar, Rav Shimon, Aimrim, no. They say this is not the case of Yamusu, of Achata Shemesa Ba'aleh, Shekipru Ba'aleh, that is Lamisa Azla. They say, Yirachi Yustavu, they graze until they get a mum. Then, when they get a mum, you can be pointed them, v'yamachru, you sell them, and therefore you sell them, and the money that you get for them now has kedusha v'yipul d'meim l'nadava, and that money is used for nadava, for a nidvus tzibur, for a korban tzibur. She'ein chatas tzibur mesa, because even though there's halach l'maish misina that a chatas that you have shekipur ba'alez l'misa, but that's a korban yochid. These are considered to be a korban tzibur. So don't you see clearly over here? It says over here in the case par v'soyer shel Yom Kippurim, and what is the answer over here? He says that Rabbi Elazar, Rav Shimon, they say that it's considered to be a korban tzibur, because they say shein chatas tzibur mesa. So don't you see clearly that the par Yom Kippurim is considered to be a korban tzibur? Rambam says no. Omrele, my par, the par that we're talking about over here is not the par of Yom Kippurim, it's par halam dover shel tzibur, and the par halam dover shel tzibur is clearly a korban tzibur. So that's what he says. Frek the Morabai asks, what do you mean? Ha shel Yom Kippurim katane? But it says shel Yom Kippur. How can you say it's Helm Dol Shet Tzibur? Rav answers ki katane when it says over here, when it says that Yom Kippur, it's not referring to the par. You have to separate the statements. Ki katana adesoyer. When it says that on Yom Kippur, it's going only on the case of the soyer. It says par. The Brisa says par. It says when it says par, it means param dover shel tzibur. V'soyer sheyom kippurim shavda, and the soyer shel yom kippurim. It's a par helm dover shel tzibur, and the soyer shel yom kippurim. So that's what's referring to Yom Kippur, but the par is the par helm dover shel tzibur. No, he says v'atanya. We have a Brisa that says par shel yom kippurim. It says clearly the par shel yom kippurim, the soyer shel yom kippurim sha'avdu. It says clearly the par of Yom Kippur and the soyer Yom Kippur sha'avdu v'hifish achem tachteim, and he designated replacement ones, and he was makriv the replacement ones. You found the original ones, kul and yamusar, left to die. The Rabbi Yehuda, but Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon Aimrim, Yirvachi Yistava, they're set to graze, left to graze, and Hirachi sold to get a mum via makru, they're sold via blue name dava. Why? She'ain chatas tzibur mesa, because the chatas tzibur is not mesa, is not left to die. So don't you see clearly over here that it is considered to be a korban tzibur? Rav answers no. He says, "Lo tema she'ein chatas tzibur mesa." Don't say that ein chatas tzibur mesa, el ema she'ein chatas hashutfim mesa, but say rather that the chatas of shutfim, of partners of shutfim, it's not a tzibur. It's the she'ein chatas hashutfim mesa, but it's not considered korban tzibur. So it's not considered a korban tzibur. It's considered to be a korban yachid, but nevertheless, it's considered a korban yachid of shutfim. It's considered a korban yachid of shutfim. Now, this is an exception because normally you don't have a chatas cannot come b'shutas. Look what the halacha says. Therefore, we points out that this is an exception because chatas normally has to come with only the individual who is oizer dever cannot come b'shutas. But over here on Yom Kippur, it's considered shutas because it's kippur ba'adoy ba'ad beis or ba'ad kol the kohanim. It's mechaper for all the kohanim, and therefore it's considered a chatas of shutim, and therefore this halacha that is left to die does not apply. So therefore, that's what we're dealing with over here. It's a chatas of shutim, but not a chatas of the tzibur. What difference does it make? Why did the difference make if it's a chatas of shutim or a chatas of tzibur? Saif called Saif, as far as the Allah L'Mayshmi Sinai is concerned, it's not left to die in either case. The reason why Rav objects to this and says don't call it a chatas of a tzibur, it's only shutfim, because the chatas of the kohanim are not considered a tzibur. Now, what's the nafkamina? What's the difference? There's a din, as we were discussing, of par helm dolvish tzibur. That means if Bezdin makes a mistake in psak, and the tzibur follows it, they bring the special chatas. What is a tzibur? So, according to one mandomer, a tzibur is even one of the shvatim, one of the 12 shvatim. That's considered a tzibur. It does not have to be Gans Klal Yisrael, even if it's a shevet. But Rava therefore objected, don't call this a tzibur. Don't call the par of Yom Kippur a chatas a tzibur, because it's not a tzibur, it's shutfim. The kahanim are not considered a tzibur in this regard. The tzibur is one of the 12 shvatim, and who have a chalukah in Eretz Yisrael. If you're going to call this a chatas of a tzibur, people will mistake to think that the kahanim are considered to be a tzibur, and therefore, if there's a mistake in psak of Bezdin, and the Kohanim follow that mistake in Psak, that you'll bring a par helm davar shel tzibur, but you can't, because the Kohanim are not called a tzibur. Therefore, he objected and said, it's not a shel tzibur, it's shel shutim. Tashma, another kasha on Rava, the boy Rabbi Elazar, he had the following shaila: L'divrei ha'omer par Yom Kippur korban yochid, according to the man Domer who says that par Yom Kippur is called a korban yochid. So, meaning there is a man Domer that's called a korban yochid. Oiset tzmura, oy eino oiset tzmura. Does it make a tzmura or not? Now, there's a din on a tmura. If a person says he wants to exchange a korban for another korban, and so hayahu tmurosi kaidish. That only applies by a korban yochid, not by a korban sibur. So the divrayim par Yom Kippur yochid that you considered a korban yochid, can you make a tmura or not? Does a din of tmura apply on it? And when you say both of them are kaidish. Now, since he says l'divra aimer, therefore, that must be, there is a man domer, and this says korban yochid, must be that it is machlekes if it's a korban yochid or it's korban sibur. So, lal meklal dikla man domer the tzibur. So, it must be that there is a man domer who says that it is a tzibur, that it is considered a korban sibur. Therefore, we see that it is a machlekes whether it's considered a korban yochid, and there is a man domer that says it's considered a korban sibur. So it's a kasha on Rava that says it's not a korban sibur. Or it says loy mechlal ikal man domer the shutfim. Now, according to Rava, he learns it's a machlekes, is it a korban yochid or a korban of shutfim? That's a machlekes, but not a korban sibur. So therefore, now according to the way the Rishayim, Tezishanim, etc., the way we're now learning the machlekes, we're revising it and going back to our original understanding of the machlekes. The original understanding of the machlekes is it considered how to define the korbanos? How we do we define the korban of a par, the machlekes in Rav Meir and Tanakama, do we define the par Yom Kippurim as a korban sibur or as a korban yochid? So Rav Meir asked on the Tanakama, you're saying that a korban sibur is Deicha Shabbos and Tumah. A korban yochid is not Deicha Shabbos and Tumah. So Rabbi Meir asks, I'll show you the par of Yom Kippur, that it is a korban yochid. It's a korban yochid, and it's Deicha Shabbos and Tumah. It is Deicha Shabbos and Tumah. Now, the way Rava understands it, therefore, is that yes, it's a machlokes and how to define it, but the way Rava understands it, it's not a machlokes whether it is a korban yochid or korban sibur. It's a machlokes whether it's a korban yochid or a korban shutfim. And as far as the halacha of being deicha Shabbos and Tumah, if it's a korban shutfim, therefore it still should be able to be deicha. So therefore, it's in this regard, since it's mechaper for all of the kahanim, it would be considered to be a korban, a shutfim in this regard, similar to a korban sibur that's deicha Shabbos and Tumas. Meaning, we're going back to our original understanding of the machlokes. It's machlokes and how to define these korbanos. So the Tanakama says that a korban sibur is deicha Shabbos and Tumah. Rabbi Meir asked on it, well, the par of Yom Kippurim is a korban yochid, and it is deicha. So you see that that's not correct. And the Tanakama held that no, it is considered to be not a korban yochid. It's considered to be a korban shutfim, and in this regard, it will be considered to be like a korban sibur, which is deicha.